I think every optometrist should join a group that's right for them. Being out there by yourself is not a good thing with this changing environment that we're in. So, but I think a big difference in our group and any other group that you could look at is our infrastructure. You know, we have 50-something employees here at Kingwood and around the country, and 193 people like yourself that are taking care of people in our local markets. They're disseminating the information on their programs. They're sharing best of practices. Those things are shared with the rest of the country, and the collaboration between 4,500 doctors that don't view each other as competitive grows all of our practices.
Hello and welcome to the Visions on Leadership podcast. I am Ted McElroy, your host, and today I have a really special guest with me today, Dr. Glenn Ellisor. Glenn is the founder, has been the president, CEO, chairman of the board for Vision Source, and has become a very good friend of mine over the years. He's done a number of other things with optometry. He's an avid hunter and fisherman and gamesman, and has been known to shoot an alligator or two. I actually today was looking through something, Glenn, today, and saw a picture of you on the Vision Source website where you're holding an alligator skull, which I had never seen before. I thought it was hysterical. But anyway, I'm really excited about having you here today, and I can't wait to share some time with you.
Thanks, Ted. Nice to be here.
So I want to kind of just dig into, you've been in practicing optometry since 1985. How did you decide to go to the humble area to start your practice?
I'm from a town not too far from here. Grew up about 25 miles from here and kind of always wanted to live in the area. And actually, I went to work next to a real low-end optical pretty much right out of school because I didn't have any money and that kind of thing, and did that for a year or two, and then I was able to buy a practice and get into private practice. But kind of opportunity, and this is where I'm from. My wife worked downtown in Houston, so we needed to stay in the Houston area.
Right. And so with being in that original content for your practice, and then buying your own, how did you decide you wanted to take that practice and go in different directions from what maybe the previous owner had done?
Well, you know, I knew that I wanted to get into private practice, and the neat thing about where I was is I was able to take my patient base with me. And they were in a real high-end location with a lot of overhead, doing about $400,000, and couldn't pay their bills. Wow. And I was able to move my patient base over, and between the two patient bases, we did 7 figures the first year. So it's kind of one of those things that I did it by opportunity. You know, it came available and I was ready. I had 2 or 3 years of patients under my belt that I could take with me and were loyal. A big contact lens practice, and the rest is kind of history.
What were some of the crucial learnings you got in those early years with that practice that have stuck with you till today?
More than anything, work ethic. You know, when everything's on the line, you work pretty hard to make sure the bills are paid and that kind of thing. But just learning to deal with vendors, learning to deal with all aspects of our profession, it was just a good training ground for me. Right.
And you were practicing from 1985 until somewhere in the early 90s when you started noticing changes in the market and how that was affecting. What was going on at that time, and how did you what was it that made you think that Vision Source was a good idea in the first place?
Well, you know, Houston was turning into just a hotbed for commercial practice. All the new chains in the country were coming here, and really there were less and less private practices. You could really see the demise of private practice in Houston, and I recognized that they had advantages, the commercial chains that we didn't have. Back then there wasn't many managed vision care patients. It was all private pay. I wish we could go back to that time.
Yeah.
But so marketing was a big deal. but you couldn't really market on an even playing field with these groups that had 15, 20 locations. You couldn't do waves or airwaves. You couldn't really, be in the newspaper, the Houston newspapers. You couldn't do yellow pages. But one of the reasons is I wanted 10 or 15 Houston area locations to work with me so we could market better. And I knew that we could buy better if we all came together as well. So those were, really the premises of what I started. And just to share ideas, get together and share ideas how we can be better.
So how long did it take you to get 5 or 10 people to say, yeah, that sounds like a great idea? Because, I can think
fairly quickly. I don't remember the numbers exactly, but within a year or two, we had 10 locations and we're off and running. So, but it was one at a time, ground roots, convincing people to, that the value was there.
And when you were doing this, how hard of a sell was it to say, oh, and by the way, you may want to consider changing the name of your practice?
Well, actually, that was a requirement, at the time. I thought that if you're going to market you needed to market under a common name. So early on, that was part of our agreement. You had to at least put member of Vision Source below it so your marketing could be more effective. So that was one of the tough sales that we had, people changing their name. Eventually, 2 or 3 years into Vision Source, we took that requirement away. We still recommended people do that, be affiliated with us, but in their marketing. But we took that requirement away 2 or 3 years into Vision Source.
So how did that change the ability for you to attract more members to join at that point?
Oh, it changed a great deal. And I get it. Somebody who's been in practice 20, 30 years under their name, there's a whole lot of value in that name and none in that market for Vision Source. So, it's a tough thing for an independent doc to make that move. And, I never criticize people that didn't want to, because
Right.
We're about independent practices. That's why we created Vision Source, and we're about making independent practice better. So, and we don't want to put restrictions on practices and require them to do much in our agreements.
So you said early on here a few minutes ago that you started noticing that things were becoming really tough for private practice optometry, and that was why you decided to do this. How different? The threats are probably maybe a little different. Maybe they're not. But how different is your view of things for private practice optometry back then compared to what you see happening to private practice optometry now?
I think it's equal to or greater than. If you think about all the groups now that can suck away independent optometrist practices, now we have private equity groups buying practices. Some of the best practices in the country are selling. And, that doesn't bode well for independent optometry if all of us sell to private equity, because you can count on those are never going to be private practices again. So you have the same commercial pressures that we had back then, or really more so now with the online stuff that exists that didn't exist back in the early 90s. So we have more pressures today than we ever did, but thank God Vision Source has had the success that it has, along with some other groups that have done well, and we've made I think a lot of inroads in keeping independent optometry successful and thriving.
So this thing started out being really something just for kind of your local network around Houston.
Right.
How did you decide it needed to be bigger, or did somebody come to you and say, hey, I want a piece of that?
Really, at early days, it was kind of the latter. I was visiting with a friend of mine in San Antonio, Mario Gutierrez, kind of telling him what we were doing, and he said, Glenn, I'd like to do that in San Antonio. And I said, well, look, I can't come over and run your monthly meetings. I can't negotiate your marketing for you locally. I'm not going to be there for you guys to share ideas, practice management ideas. You need to administer our program in San Antonio, so I'm going to make you our administrator. And that term today is still used we have 193 leaders like yourself and markets around the country to lead our groups and provide value at a local level. So, but he asked me first to do that, and we had success there. Went to Dallas, but really the big thing was when Bobby Christensen asked me or told me he's interested in becoming, Vision Source and doing it in the Oklahoma area. I had no idea somebody like Bobby would be interested, because in my mind this was a means to compete with corporate America in a metropolitan area. They didn't even have commercial practice in Oklahoma at the time. So
right.
Why, in my mind, it didn't really resonate why they really felt that it would be beneficial there. Of course, now, very quickly I got that. But so he asked me to come up and present, to their group, and I said, "Oh no, let's just do it one at a time, because I don't want that negative feedback that you sometimes get in these big group meetings." And he said, "No, Glenn, we're either all going to join or none of us are going to join," and all of them joined. So yeah, it started out like that, and then he introduced me to his lecture buddies, and we started reaching out at that point to the who's who in every market across the country.
Knocked my stuff down. Sorry about that. So then, when you're going into this meeting with Bobby, and what are some of the thoughts you're having? I mean, because this is a way different way of thinking things through than you'd thought of it before. So what kind of things were you prepared for? What kind of things were you maybe thinking, oh my gosh, what if this happens, as you were going into that?
I mean, I just expected, this guy in the back of the room to go just challenge us with everything we said, and, not being able to get through the presentation and that kind of thing. But, the optometrists are gracious people. And just all across the country, and we just never really ran into that. It was from that point on that we started having group presentations in these different markets.
And so you go from Texas to Oklahoma, and then you go to Oregon, of all places.
Actually, Washington.
Or Washington, yes, right.
Yeah,
so
Washington.
how do you pick? I mean, because that's not exactly next door to either Texas or Oklahoma.
Right. Well, Bobby introduced us to a guy in his study group, Joe Pfeiffer, and he did the same thing. He asked 10 of his buddies that he was close to, colleagues, to a meeting, and Joe did something that that we had never really done. He actually took a year's worth of his invoices in his practice and put our pricing in next to them and calculated the savings, and showed the group that he had a multiple seven-figure practice that I forget how much he was going to save, $70,000-$80,000 after paying our fees just from buying the same products that he was already buying. And those 10 offices joined us within a couple of weeks. So Joe taught us something. A lot of times you present to a doc and tell them what your prices are. They go, yeah, that's okay, that's $3 off our product. They don't really get the magnitude of how much it is when you add it all up together. So at that time, my wife and I then went on the road and started pulling invoices in practices and comparing our pricing and actually proving that people were going to save a whole lot more money than they were going to pay us, and that really helped our closure rate in all markets.
So, it's one thing to help save money, I get that, but and I'm speaking from a somewhat of a pulpit on this one a little bit too, but as you and I both know, there's a whole lot more to Vision Source than just saving some money, because sooner or later that kind of wears off a little bit. What do you feel like is really the thing that's the crux of making sure that members are really well taken care of?
I think the huge difference in us and any other group, and I'm not saying I don't want to say negative things about other groups.
No.
I think every optometrist should join a group that's right for them. Being out there by yourself is not a good thing with this changing environment that we're in. So, but I think a big difference in our group and any other group that you could look at is our infrastructure. We have 50-something employees here at Kingwood and around the country, and 193 people like yourself that are taking care of people in our local markets They're disseminating the information on their programs. They're sharing best of practices. Those things are shared with the rest of the country, and the collaboration between 4,500 doctors that don't view each other as competitive grows all of our practices. We have about 12,000 meetings a year, if you added them all up, between the meetings that our administrators like yourself have and what we call our VSR, Vision Source Representatives, who are office managers basically, to get together to share how to implement programs. The collaboration between all of that and it coming up and then sharing it across the country is really impossible for people to understand unless they've experienced it. That's the reason that since we started measuring it in 2002, there's not been 1 year that the average gross of our practices didn't grow more than any other segment in the profession, whether it be commercial practice or private practice and so on. And that's just, as you know, just the beginning. All the programs that Vision Source Corporate does, the business of optometry and all those, the Frame Dream, where what do we call it, management?
Framework management.
Supply chain management, and all those things. We have dozens and dozens of programs that benefit practices that, groups that don't have the infrastructure that we have just simply can't afford to do that for their members.
And the other thing I think I've found from not only doing what I get to do now, which is basically facilitate a meeting, and I'll be the first one to say I don't lead that meeting. Our group leads that meeting. It's more of a kind of a group coaching session. Yeah. I get as much out of it as they do, but just like you were saying, the fact that these people sit down with each other and share really some very open things about their practices that you might think, oh my gosh, I can't believe they're actually saying that out loud sometimes. But when you start looking at these people that you've gained this trust with, that you've really come to love, and they're brothers and sisters of yours, and you go through all the hurts and the wonderful things that happen with them too, and that growth that comes out of it, I think, is just incredible. It's so freeing, and it's not just financial growth. It's basically personal growth that comes out of it. So much more of it too. And you're exactly right, Glenn. That's what really I think that makes it so special.
And it's an amazing thing that I didn't envision, when I started Vision Source. I thought there'd be some community when we got together in Houston and shared ideas, but to the level it's happened today, I had no idea that something like this would ever come about.
So when you look at the stages of development for Vision Source, what were some of the hurdles that you guys had to get over in leadership? First of all, you had to develop a leadership team. How did you figure that out? The second thing is, what were the hurdles you guys had to go over to get to the next level?
Starting out in the very beginning, the word franchise.
Yeah.
When I went to visit with attorneys to tell them what we wanted to do, they threw out the F word at me, and I said, there's no way we can be a franchise. That's the groups that we're wanting to compete against. And so we started out as a license arrangement and didn't have the practice management component. But we started realizing that that's the most valuable component of the things that we offer. So we switched to even a more doctor-friendly agreement, but it's a franchise, so you had to overcome that in the marketplace, right? And early on, convincing vendors when you're small where you're going to get the programs that we needed was a pretty big hurdle. And then on the other side, convincing docs that they needed to switch their partnerships with their labs sometimes, or with the contact lens company that they like that we're not partnering with, and so on. Some of that stuff wasn't easy, but over time we got it. Then, so it took us 9 years to get to 200 locations. But in 2000 we made the decision to invest in the company. We backed out of practice. We were doing that part-time. all of my leadership team backed out of practice. We brought more leaders in, invested in the company, and we could afford it then. And it took off to the next level. We started adding 200, 250 net new offices a year during the early turn of the century.
So in those early stages, what did your day look like? I mean, I can't imagine I know what your day looks like now. I can't imagine what it looked like back then. How did you manage your time?
We were all so passionate about what we were doing. It was fun. So when you're really, really enjoying what you do, it's easy to work long hours. But we worked long hours. We still, all the docs, still saw patients one day a week. And, we'd get on a plane and fly to one city and then go from there to another city and get home. And, there were busy times. But we were all fully engaged and enjoyed being around each other. Our leadership team really enjoyed, we were friends as well as colleagues, and it was just something you had to do. You had to work at it though, to be a good family man and do that took work. There were a lot of times when it sure would have been better to spend the night rather than catch a red eye home for a son's baseball game or swim meet or something like that. But you just do, you just sacrifice and do it. And two of my kids are optometrists today because of it.
And they're in your practice, correct?
Right, yeah.
So what's it like having a legacy practice?
It's cool. It's good news and bad news, right? They'll tell you things that your other associates won't tell you, right?
Right.
We can't take family vacations anymore because I can't take 3 doctors out of the practices at a time. So yeah, there's some bad coming along with it, but it is so rewarding to practice side by side, with your kids. They're a lot better doctor than I am, and they're slowly learning the business. And one of these days I'll hand it over to them and let them run it, but they're not ready yet.
That's, as some of the listeners know, that's kind of what I'm leading toward. My son Hank is in his third year of optometry school in Pikeville, and hopefully we'll be graduating in 2026. And his plan is to come back here at this point, and I'm really hoping he does because, and not because I think it'd just be great to get a chance to work with him, just to have an opportunity because when I was young, I'd work with my dad in the summers, and it was unfortunate, I guess, that I chose not to go into that profession. It just didn't appeal to me. My dad's a printer, and my dad's for him, that's art. That's how he does his art.
Right.
And it just didn't fit my mold. And that was always something I kind of felt bad that I really didn't have that opportunity. I still have a great relationship with my dad, but it's not the same kind of thing as watching other people who've done these legacy businesses and how they'd went. How have you prepared your kids when this is me getting $10,000 worth of free advice here. How have you prepared your kids to take over? I mean, what kind of things are you doing to get them ready for that sort of thing?
It's easy for them to be fat and happy seeing patients. They're busy. They're making, decent income, and it's more difficult for them to take on some of the management responsibilities. So, I just back off in our staff meetings and have them present when they really prefer that I do, and things like that. And I'm down to seeing patients very little. With some health issues I got and all that, I'm not there much, so I just rely on them more and more to say, hey, you just have to do this. And they've come a long way. At first, they really weren't interested in that. They just wanted to see patients. They wanted to be doctors, right? But in the last year or two, I've seen a pretty big change in them. I'm starting to take an interest in the management and the business side of it. I was always the opposite. When I was in school, I was always wondering, how on earth am I going to make a living at this? So I worked with optometrists through optometry school to try to understand that, where, that was the furthest thing from their mind. They just want to be good doctors, and they're great doctors. They're a lot better than I am. But
Right. So when you look at some of those lessons, how many of the lessons that you learned when you were starting out are you teaching them now? Hard work, obviously, but is there anything else that you're sort of leaving them as a legacy?
Just the integrity side of it. I don't really have to work on that with them. They're kids that have ultimate integrity and that kind of thing. But always doing the right thing I stress that for our staff as well as patients. Really learning to really care for that patient as a person, not as a product or a means for a business, but really care about their needs. As you know, some people are like that naturally, and some people that you hire in your practices, they don't have that. And my kids have it, but just really having them take that to the next level and give the kind of care that we've been given for years is something I've tried to emphasize, and they're doing it. They're booked out, as much or more than the associates that have been with me 20 years already. So
one of the things also I think that you do really well, and this is something I've told you before I really admire, is the fact that you live out your faith without beating somebody over the head with it. How did you come about feeling comfortable enough to talk about things like that? One of the things I've always appreciated is the fact that I know there's we get a chance to have a prayer service at the exchange, which we'll talk about in a minute. But we used to open up the exchange with a prayer. It was something that always really resonated with me, and I can remember you and Jim Greenwood talking about your faith on stage, which was really important to me. How did you get that courage?
It was kind of a commitment that I made before I got an optometry school. I just told the Lord, if you want me to be an optometrist, get me in school, because I wasn't sure I was going to get an optometry school. If you don't, I want you to show me what you want me to do, and I promise you I'll honor you in whatever it is. And ended up being an optometrist, and he reminded me of that when I was seeing the patient one day. And I went, okay, what does that mean? So that's just kind of what we tried to do with the practice and even the franchise. And that's why we opened with prayer. And when I was CEO, we prayed before every leadership team meeting and so on. Just, okay, Lord, how can I honor you and what we do? And I tell my kids, we can be the best doctors. My other one's a nurse practitioner doctor. We can be the best parents, but if we miss that faith part, we miss the boat in life.
Your eyes and your vision are under attack. Damaging blue light from the sun, your phone, your computer, your tablet, even light bulbs and car headlights is constantly bombarding you. The good news is our eyes actually already have a line of defense to counter the effects of blue light. This defense is made up of 3 pigments called carotenoids. MacuHealth with Micromicelle, the only supplement with the exclusive patent on all 3 macular carotenoids and Micromicelle technology.
Hi, I want to talk to you for just a moment about a great lens that we are using in our practice. It is the Varilux XR design lens. And the reason we love it is because of what it's doing for our guests in our practice. Don't get me wrong, Varilux has been making great lenses for years, and I'm sure they're going to have one better than this eventually. But the Varilux XR design and the Varilux XR track are truly making lives better for my guests in my practice. When I'm talking to them about it in the practice, I basically say this. I say, there's a lot of progressive lenses that you've had where you've had a little bit of a challenge. You kind of got to figure out exactly where that reading spot, that sweet spot is on your lens. Well, with this lens, they figured out a way of how to put the in-between vision and the near vision in the same place. And the reason they do that is because they take into account a lot of specific measurements about you, including the fact that we've got this special computer. It's basically based on an iPad. I don't go into more of that, called an iRuler 2. They'll take more or less a 3D rendering of how your eye sits on that lens. What that does for you is keep you from having to figure out where to look through that lens. And that's going to make you a lot more happy with your life. Not to mention the fact, can't you imagine what it's going to be like to go home and your eyes still feel good? And for those people who are dealing with a little bit more challenge, I also recommend doing the XR track. The reason I like this very much is because it's actually watching the way eyes move. Through using the eye ruler program, they'll hold the iPad and they'll watch these dots go around, and it truly maps the way the eye moves. That comes up with a really good formulation of how they can perfect this lens and make the vision work better. So if you really want to know more about the Varilux XR lens line, please get with your Essilor account representative as soon as possible. Thank you.
On episode 102 of this podcast, Chris interviewed Justin Kwan, Michelle Andrews, and Richard Ruth. They pointed out that as a profession, we have done a great job of letting our patients know that myopia is not a big deal. If you can see 20/20, there is no worry. It is the high myopes that are more danger. And as they said, that message is tragic. Any myopia has a higher risk of maculopathy, glaucoma, and earlier cataract development. In the MiSight one-day clinical trials, only 4% of study participants who got ProClear one-days stayed stable in their myopia progression over the 3-year period. That means you can confidently say, parent, by not going to a system geared to slow the myopia progression, there is a 96% chance your child's vision will get worse. This may take away some of the choice your child has in the future as to how they will correct their vision. Choice, not fear of the disease associations with myopia, is what best resonates with parents when it comes to myopia control for their children. And with CooperVision's MiSight One Day, we now have an FDA-approved single-use contact lens to lessen the progression of myopia in our patients. Contact your CooperVision representative to find out more about MiSight One Day contact lenses.
I completely agree. I can remember one time I had this one guest that was in the practice, and she was really worried about this surgery she was having. Had nothing to do with her eyes. I can't remember what it was about, but she was really worried about it. If it was some sort of intestinal thing. And as she was getting ready to leave, I said, "You mind if I pray for you?" And we just prayed a few moments, and as she was getting up to leave, I said, "Good luck." I said, "Oh, hey, hang on a second. You don't have to have a good luck. You got God with you." And about 3 weeks later, she'd come back in for something else, and she said, "I want to tell you, because of what you said, it made me feel so much more at ease about this procedure that you had nothing to do with, and I really just was there as the patient. But to have somebody say that to me just really put me at ease, and I've always felt really emboldened because of that. It's kept me a lot of times from not. Sometimes I might not have said something to somebody, but after that I've been a lot more forthcoming because I know it does mean something to people. And it means something to me knowing that I was able to touch them through that. I mean, God just put me in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, I've done that as well, and it's huge for people, to pray for them on the spot. They don't expect that.
Right. So as you look at where Vision Source is now, and moving into the, what kind of things do you feel like Vision Source is representing for optometry now, and how is it different from what it was, or is it any different from what it was when you got started back in the 90s?
Vision Source has just gotten so good at helping doctors change. If we don't change, the profession's changing so much from a technological perspective. If we don't change, we're not going to be around. Everything we do, whether it be the operations or how we connect with patients or even how we examine patients, is going to be different 5 or 10 years from now. Think about, how we're going to navigate all that as practitioners. I've found it so much easier through all these changes. Vision Source members helped me make all these changes in my practice way before I could do it by myself. Think about COVID. When COVID was here, everybody else was stressing out how to manage practice through COVID. It was pretty easy with Vision Source.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody came together and they gave us kind of a cookbook. Here's what you need to do. Here's what you need to do. And it really made the difference. And that's really one of the best things that Vision Source does is it teaches people how to implement change in their practice. We implement technology far faster than the rest of the industry. I can remember at one time we had more Optomap placements in Vision Source than the rest of the world. But it's not only that we get a good deal on a piece of equipment, but we teach each other how to incorporate it in our practice, and that's true with almost anything. AI, imagine how AI is going to be affecting our practice 5 or 10 years from now. I'd hate to have to do that by myself, but knowing that we already have experts that are sharing how to do a lot of that stuff that I still can't do in practice, but we'll get there because of them. That's going to be one of the huge differences I think that Vision Source will make. We'll always have the best buying power and a lot of the other things that we've done, but continuing to help people implement new technology and change their practices is going to be a huge role that Vision Source plays.
So what are some of the things that maybe we could have done a little better along the way that taught us lessons moving forward?
I think doing it sooner rather than later, and that's just been my mistake along the way. That's why it took us 10 years to get 200 and something offices, bring in infrastructure earlier. I should have had the Vision Source representative program where we involved our office managers way earlier. It's just jumping on things when you know it's coming now. As quick as you can, whether it might be a little investment now, I think is something we can do better. And having a good partner like Ellisor-Exotica to help us with that is going to make a huge difference, especially with their focus in technology and equipment.
So do you consider yourself somewhat of a risk taker? Let's face it, this wasn't something that was simple to figure out, and just stepping out on the ledge and saying, hey, I think you guys should consider thinking about this.
Yeah, any kind of, I guess I get called a visionary sometimes. I don't necessarily agree with that, but I think anybody that has some visionary blood is a risk taker. But that's what makes life interesting and fun too, rather than just taking the easy path, not always the exciting thing to do. And there were times though that we felt like the wheels were coming off. That, Vision Source is going to fall apart. And it really wasn't. But as a leadership team, this battle we were fighting. And I think our just stubborn persistence, is one of the reasons that we had success. And I think, that's true with practices. A lot of times feel like at practice, everything's going wrong. 3/4 of my employees have quit or this and that, and all my equipment's breaking down, and, but I think just stubborn persistence is a way that a good leader can maintain, can have success, is hanging in there, right?
You talked earlier about how many meetings that we have within the network. 12,000, I believe, is the number I heard.
1,200.
1,200, excuse me.
Did I say 12? I said 12,000.
Yeah, okay.
That was my nerves.
So, 1,200 meetings. So 1,200 meetings a year. One of those is probably the grand dame of the whole thing, and that's the exchange. And used to be the national meeting, if I remember correctly. When did you guys realize this sounds like a good idea to get everybody together for a sort of a family reunion type kind of process to talk about it all?
Had one, I don't know about the second year, but it was mainly a ski trip with one vendor, and Valerie Manso, a practice management person, we had her in talk to us, and had a little bit of business and some skiing and fun, and it just kind of grew from there. I can remember I went to a convention that TLC had where they had bought a company and they were having a big meeting to bring the two companies together, and they hired a production company to do it, stage and lighting, and prior to that, Vision Source, we would meet in a room and with an overhead projector or our little tray of slides, and maybe a vendor in the back. And I can remember coming to our monthly leadership team meeting and say, guys, we're going to change. We're going to hire one of these companies. It's going to cost us $80,000, but it's going to be worth it. And nobody in the room wanted to do it but me. But I saw the effectiveness of having, you know, that kind of production. And here we are, you know, it's one of the, I think it's the best meeting in the industry or profession, for sure, in terms of camaraderie and you know, experience for our members. You know, compared to going to another convention, it's just not the same.
I mean this to come out the way it's going to come out, and I hope I say it right, but it is the biggest small meeting I've ever been to. When I say small, I mean everybody is very engaged with each other.
Yeah.
That was way different from any other meeting I'd ever been to. And the very first one I got to go to was 2003. We went to South Beach, Miami. And I remember the first day we had all these breakout sessions we were doing. And everybody's talking about business. And I kept thinking, we're going to talk about like how to take care of our guests. Yeah, we are. We're just not going to talk about their diseases. We're going to talk about how to take care of them. We're going to talk about how to take care of your team. We're going to talk about how to take care of your business. But all that other disease stuff, we're going to leave that to somebody. That's not saying that the technology we're bringing in isn't important, and it does help out with that stuff. But we're going to teach you and tell you how to take that stuff and make it to where it means something to you and your practice and your guests. And I think that was the first time I started realizing this is really different from any other meeting I'd ever been to. The way it's changed, I can remember 2003, I was sitting on the back row with Bob Burns and Brian Kahn, and we addressed the stage from the back of the room without a microphone. Now there are about 4,000 or 5,000 people in a huge convention center type kind of thing. There's no way that could even happen without having multiple microphones going around the room, even if we had the time to do that sort of thing. But yet it still feels cozy. You know, how do we create that?
It's just evolved. It's just a family. You know, everybody, believe it or not, I mean, you know most of the people.
Yeah.
You know hundreds of, you know, everybody knows hundreds of people. They keep coming to the meetings every year, and they develop relationships around the country, and that they know that they're on the same team. They're not a competitor. You know, you go to other optometry meetings and nobody shares what they're doing because, I don't know, they don't want to hold it to their vest. And this is everybody's out to help each other, and it's sure not something that I ever expected that would happen when we started Vision Source. It's an amazing thing, it really is.
So what I think it is, I think it's the accessibility of our leadership first. I can remember that first meeting I went to, and one of the first people I bumped into was Walt West. To me, Walt was kind of this just optometry god. You know, he's definitely optometry famous for sure. And the only reason I even had somewhat of a relationship with him, only on a name basis, was because one of my classmates, Kenny Young, and he were partners. And so that was the only in that I had. But, you know, walking into the meeting and seeing him in the exhibit hall and him saying something to me first, and then later on in the meeting sitting in a room with him and him literally sharing all of these great things he was doing in his practice with everybody sitting in the room and other people sharing these same kind of things, and realizing, dang, I mean, these people are just givers. It's really what it came down to, is it was a giving type of organization.
Yeah.
And I think that has stayed the same. Part of it, I feel like, has a lot to do with you setting that tone at the very beginning, with a lot of your people you brought in the leadership, and it's still there today. I think that Amir is probably just as accessible as you've always been, and to the membership, and I think that's what really means a lot.
And you see it in all aspects of what our members do. You know, the foundation, the way they keep giving every year to docs in trouble, you know, with all the national disasters and disease, you know, cancer and deaths and things, and the way our members support those, it's just incredible. it
Right.
is. You did put, describe it correctly. And Vision Source is a bunch of givers. And I've heard Amir characterize our membership with that term.
So for those who don't know, Amir Khoshnevis is who we're speaking about. He is currently the medical director for Vision Source and is now at the leadership. He is the head leader person.
He's the
I
president.
forgot what the title. Yeah, president now
Yeah.
of the company. And I was actually having a conversation with him yesterday, and he said that one thing that he's trying to get some group of people trying to understand really the crux of what the difference really is between Vision Source and some of the other groups. And again, I agree with you, Glenn. I think that you should join something because it is dangerous standing out in the road by the middle by yourself. But having a group to bat with you is really important. And the difference, he says, he feels like, is the level of trust that's there. And the reason he says that is, here's the difference. All these other groups that are out there, it's like, we're going to give you this and it doesn't cost you anything. Just come and do that sort of thing. Vision Source ploy is, you pay us some amount, like 2.5%, I believe, is what the gross is now, and we're going to give you more back than you paid us. That takes a lot of trust. And, the fact that Vision Source has backed that up regularly over and over again, I think that's one of the biggest differences, the fact that that level of trust is there and we know we can kind of take it to the bank.
And it's because we have some of the most trustworthy names in the profession in the group. It makes that easier. You think about yourself and Walt West and Bobby Christensen and on and on and on and on. That's the leadership of Vision Source. And people in the profession know those people, and they go, wow, if they're saying that's true, it makes it easier to trust. No one hardly even knew who Glenn was until you guys made Vision Source successful. And now, it's half the people there at the national meeting, the exchange, know who I am. But it's really the trustworthiness of all of our leaders across the field that it's really done that. I always said that we sell trust. That's really when somebody's thinking about joining Vision Source, we're convincing them, like you said, to trust us.
Yeah, for me, if I'm talking to a potential member as the administrator for our area, and I got to look at these people on a regular basis. Not even if they decide after the end of 5 years they don't want to be a member anymore, I still got to look at them because they're going to be at my society meetings, they're going to be at my state meeting, they're going to be at the AOA or the SECO or something like that, and I still got to look at them and say, I hope I was good for you. I hope I was something that was helpful for you. I couldn't bear having someone think that I had led them down the wrong road. I think that would just really crush me.
We took that very serious as a leadership team at our monthly meetings, talking about driving more value to our members, because we knew that we're putting not only our reputation on the line, but we're putting 180 leaders across the country. We're putting your reputation on the line, having people join us if we can't deliver, according to our promises. So you're exactly right. You guys risk a lot if you didn't trust us, the whole organization, to provide the value.
So as you look into the future, I know you got your crystal ball sitting there on your desk. In the next 5, 10, 15 years, what is Vision Source going to have to do to remain successful?
I think just continue to build member value. I always said you keep providing the same value all the time, and docs start to fail to recognize that it's true value. It's just they accept it as. So it's kind of, what have you done for me lately? And this, I'm not saying that from a negative perspective, but
right.
we have to always continue to provide new value to to I think, take Vision Source to the next level. And I think that the leadership team that exists today recognizes that, and they are working hard to do that. I've heard some things that they've proposed, and if some of those come off, it'll dramatically increase the value that we're providing. But can't talk about them because you don't want to set people's expectations and then something happen and not be able to deliver on them. But yeah, it's all about creating more value, and whether it be in programs, some new product that's off the charts, discountable, or services that we've not thought about yet that we could provide our members. We have to, I think, dramatically increase the value. I want to see Vision Source go from 3,000 to, at a peak, 4,500 offices with 9,000 docs. I think if we get there, we have really preserved our profession for decades, if we can make that kind of impact. And I think it's achievable.
So, you get to the end of your career, let's say. How do you want to be remembered?
I don't need to necessarily be remembered, but
somebody's going to remember you.
Just somebody who was honest with people, just honest and straightforward, and was a partner, good friend. I don't have to be remembered anything beyond that.
Well, Glenn, I really appreciate all the time you spent with me. This was a blast. I hope it was fun for you. It was great for me. And is there anything you think that the audience needs to know before we sign off?
No, I just, those that are members, I appreciate you guys trusting us for all these years. And for those of you that aren't, y'all look at it. I think most people that really stay in and stay engaged tell us time and again that it's the best business decision they've made in their career, and we'd like to share that with you. So
I can say after 22 years, after 22 years for me, it's been great for me too. Thank you, Glenn, for everything you've done. Thank you for this time, and can't wait to see you again soon.
Thank you. Take care.
Hey, if you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts and our YouTube channel, both linked in the show notes. Now, here's something exciting. We're giving away a 1-year subscription to Comprehensive Optometry Simplified. All you have to do is leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, take a screenshot, and email it to me at questions@icodeeducation.com. We'll put that in the show notes as well. We'll be selecting a winner on December 15th, so don't miss your chance to get access to this valuable resource. Thanks again for listening. I can't wait to see your reviews.